comes out, it almost always, but not 100% of the time, comes with a rating, whose purpose is to determine if and to what extent a film is appropriate for young children to see, which is ultimately the decision of their parents. If you haven't already seen it, make sure to check out my video, Parental Advisory Label Explained, in which I discuss the history and application of a popular metric by which parents determine whether a CD is suitable for listening by their children. If you like this video, and others like it, which break down the many facets of the society and culture we live in, give it a big thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, tap the bell icon, and add the Explained playlist to your YouTube account. Now let's get started. In 1934, William Hays instated the Hays Code, which was a clear, strict set of guidelines filmmakers had to follow when making a movie. Any movie that did not follow these guidelines could not be released for public viewing, as it was deemed too offensive. Examples of said guidelines included no use of God's name in vain, no ridicule or other negative depictions of religious officials, no white slavery, no miscegenation or interracial sexual activity, no suggestive nudity, no sexual activity, and no depictions of rape or childbirth. Under the strict enforcement of the Hays Code, there was no middle ground. A film was either approved or it wasn't. In 1966, Motion Picture Association of America President Jack Valenti criticized the Hays Code as being a form of censorship and a violation of the First Amendment. In wake of filmmakers indicating a desire to push the code's boundaries and fearing, quote-unquote, the possible intrusion of government into the movie arena, Valenti developed a set of advisory ratings to be applied to films after their completion in lieu of censoring movies the Hays Code deemed offensive. These original ratings were as follows: G for general audiences, M for movies suggested for mature audiences, R or restricted, meaning anyone under the age of 16 would not be admitted into the theater without a parent or guardian, and X, meaning anyone under 16 would not be admitted at all. In 1970, the age limit for R and X rated films was raised to 17, and the M rating was changed to GP, meaning general audiences, parental advisory suggested. This was to clear up the confusion about who the M-rated films were meant for. 2 years later, GP was changed to PG, meaning parental guidance for films with material that might not be suitable for minors. In the 1980s, films such as Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom and Gremlins, which were targeted to older children, were given PG ratings. However, due to the fantasy violence in these films, many parents complained that a PG rating was insufficient. The MPAA then tried to come up with a rating for films that were not inherently inappropriate for all children, but that parents of children may potentially not want their children to see. It was from this that the PG-13 rating, which strongly cautioned parents that certain material in the film in question may not be appropriate for children under the age of 13 to be exposed to, came about. Over time, the X rating came to carry the connotation that films that received it were inherently obscene or pornographic. This made the public question the X ratings of such films as Midnight Cowboy and A Clockwork Orange, which were inherently adult but could not necessarily be considered pornographic. So in September 1990, the MPAA replaced the X rating with the NC-17 rating, which meant no children 17 and under admitted, with or without a parent or guardian. This rating remains quite controversial, as films that receive it are not given much advertising, and many theaters refuse to show them, and they are often not sold at video rental stores, and this has led the rating to be considered synonymous with censorship. Today, all movie ratings except for the G rating, which are considered not to contain any offensive material, come with a descriptor that briefly lists the content in the film that warranted the rating. Between 1990 and 2000, the MPAA only included descriptors on R-rated films, but in the 21st century, they started adding them to PG, PG-13, and NC-17 rated films so that parents would have a better idea of what specifically they might be concerned about. Now let's go over each rating that exists today and what exactly it means. The G rating, which means general audiences, has come to carry the connotation of being given to children's movies, but that's not what the rating means. It simply means that nothing in the movie would be of major concern to parents considering allowing their children to see it. That's why G-rated movies don't come with a rating descriptor. For a movie to receive a G rating, it cannot contain any depictions of sex, drug use, or nudity. It can only contain minimal violence, and said violence must be cartoonish in nature. Dialogue can go beyond the level of polite conversation, but cannot contain any swear words. Parents of very young children may or may not allow their children to view a PG-rated film, depending on whether or not they feel comfortable with the specific content included in the film in question. The film can contain mature themes, mild profanity, and brief nudity as long as it is not sexually oriented. Some more overprotective parents may decide that their children ought to be shielded from such content despite its mild nature. But we're at a point now where a lot of kids' movies are given this rating, and rational, non-caring parents don't give too much thought to it, even though there's a reason these movies are rated PG and not G. PG movies cannot contain any use of narcotics or of sexually derived language. As I mentioned earlier, the PG-13 rating was created to serve as an indicator of movies that, as far as content goes, fall in the gray area between a PG and an R rating. As its name implies, the themes, violence, nudity, sexual content, language, and adult situations and films that receive this rating are of such an intensity that a parent may only want their children who are 13 and older to see it. A film that contains any drug use or nudity that is not brief will receive at least a PG-13 rating, and said nudity cannot be sexually oriented. Violence in a PG-13 film may be more extreme or realistic than in a G or PG film, but cannot be persistent or too visually graphic. A PG-13 film can contain up to 4 uses of what are called harsher, sexually derived words, such as the F-bomb. And even then, the word can only be used as an expletive. Even one use of one of these words in its sexual context requires an R rating, as does 5 or more uses of these words, whether sexually or as an expletive. Contrary to popular belief, children under the age of 17 can see an R-rated film as long as they are accompanied by a parent or guardian. But that's not happening if the children don't want to go to the movies with their parents or their parents refuse to go with them. Parents are urged to take an R rating very seriously, as these movies contain harsh profanity, adult situations, graphic violence, sexual activity, sexually oriented nudity, and drug use. A parent may consider allowing their children to see an R-rated film if the film in question is one they could benefit from seeing, such as a documentary or war film, once they've investigated the film and determined that the violence, language, and or sexual content is something their particular child can handle. But generally speaking, parents are strongly discouraged from taking their children to see an R-rated film. The NC-17 rating, formerly called the X rating, is the highest rating in the entire MPAA rating system. Unlike an R-rated film, which a minor will be admitted to if accompanied by a parent or guardian, no children under the age of 17 are admitted into an NC-17 film with or without a parent, hence its name. Not all NC-17 films are inherently obscene or pornographic in nature. The rating merely means that parents would generally consider the film in question patently too adult for their minors due to the extent of violent, sex, aberrational behavior, or drug abuse included in the film. Although no rating, including NC-17, is meant to be a negative judgment of the film, ratings have sparked a great deal of controversy and criticism of the board and system. Ever since the rules were made in 1968, the rating board and system have come under fire from filmmakers and from the public for their controversial methods and rating choices. You can learn more about this in the documentary, This Film Is Not Yet Rated. But for now, I'm just going to go over some of the supposed flaws for which the MPAA rating system has been criticized. One of the first of these is that it's been said that when it comes to rating films, the MPAA seems to be stricter about language and sexual content than about violence. In many investigations, including those done for This Film Is Not Yet Rated, it's been found that a film is more likely to receive one of the two restrictive ratings, R and NC-17, based on sex and or language, than it is to receive one of these ratings based on violence. It seems that the MPAA has a strict algorithm about the number of times a profane word can be used and about the length and nature of sex scenes that can be contained in a film before it receives a restrictive rating, and yet so many films have gotten off with a PG-13 rating despite portraying massive amounts of gruesome violence. Also, when it comes to giving ratings, the MPAA has been accused of favoring films released by major studios over those made by independent filmmakers. There are many examples of this that I could use, but to save time, I'm only going to do one. For Matt Stone and Trey Parker, who are famous and infamous for creating South Park and the Broadway musical The Book of Mormon, one of their first major projects was the 1997 superhero sex comedy film Orgasmo. Mind you, Stone and Parker made this movie on their own before they struck it big with South Park. Despite the film's sexual nature, The sexual content was not particularly graphic, with no sexual organs visible on screen except for a dildo, yet the film was given an NC-17 rating. As Stone discusses in This Film Is Not Yet Rated, Stone and Parker asked the ratings board for specification of why Orgasmo received the rating that it did, but the board would not give any beyond graphic sexual content. Moreover, Stone and Parker did not have the time or money to edit the film, so there was nothing they could do about the NC-17 rating, which compromised the film's commercial success. But 3 years later, Dimension Films, which was a division of the Walt Disney Company, released the comedy Scary Movie, and it only received an R rating despite its graphic sexual content, which included on-screen appearances of ejaculation, oral sex, and an erect penis. Moreover, as also discussed in This Film Is Not Yet Rated, when Stone and Parker released the film South Park Bigger, Longer, and Uncut through Paramount Studios, the ratings board gave them very specific notes on what edits they would need to lower the film's rating from an NC-17 to an R, and gave them multiple chances to edit and resubmit the film before they finally granted it an R rating. The MPAA is notoriously secretive about who the board consists of, how board members are recruited, and how and why they make the decisions they do. This has made the public very suspicious about these things and about the true intentions, adequacy, or lack thereof of the system. Although parents generally find the rating system helpful, they also generally agree that they would be even more helpful if their standards and processes were made public. Just like with the parental advisory label, some have said that R and NC-17 ratings unintentionally serve as a form of reverse psychology, only making minors more interested in seeing movies that their parents are unlikely to let them see. Some say that this is what led to the dawn of R cards, which were distributed by GKC theaters for parents to buy, which gave their children permission to attend a screening of an R-rated film without being accompanied by a parent. This outraged MPAA President Jack Valenti, who claimed it defeated the purpose of the R rating. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope this video makes a little clearer the ratings a movie can receive and where those ratings come from. Some say the rating system's a little shady and not quite an appropriate way to determine if and at what age children should see a movie. Like I mentioned earlier, surveys have generally found that parents find the system useful, but this is merely in comparison to having no algorithm for determining what movies are appropriate for children. The one thing that can be said for the MPAA and its rating system is that it's a heck of a lot better than the Hays Code that took place before it, which would outright ban movies altogether for being seen as even a little bit offensive. What do you think of the MPAA and its rating system? Let me know in the comments down below. And I'll see you next time for another installment of my Countdown series. Bye!